I was publicly betrayed by my husband and my sister, but I turned the tables and achieved my victory. I never imagined my life could change so quickly. I always thought I was strong and prepared, but nothing prepared me for what happened that day. It was my 29th birthday and also the day of my promotion at work. I was excited, feeling recognized for my efforts, believing that my efforts would finally be appreciated. But at the same time, a strange feeling of exhaustion kept me from feeling completely happy. Something inside me told me something was wrong, but I ignored it. I never could have imagined that the most painful betrayal of my life would be revealed at that moment. During the celebratory gathering, just as I was about to receive my congratulations and greetings, I overheard suspicious conversations, hidden smiles, exchanged glances. My heart raced without me understanding why. And then, Leonardo, my husband, entered the room with a forced smile, accompanied by Sophia, my sister. The feeling I had was as if the ground had dropped out from under me. There was no explosion, no screams, but everything revealed itself in the worst possible way. Glances, suppressed laughter, suggestive comments. In front of everyone, I realized they were together and that Sophia was pregnant. I couldn't breathe properly. A mixture of despair, shame, and anger overcame me. I wanted to run away, to cry, to scream, but I stood there frozen as the room spun around me. The moment I realized the extent of the betrayal, I felt a deep emptiness, a hole in my chest that seemed to swallow my entire body. I spent a few seconds, maybe minutes, unable to think of anything other than the raw pain that gripped me. I tried to understand how they could have done this to me, how my own sister, whom I had always considered one of the closest people, could betray my love, my trust, my history. Worst of all, the betrayal was so public, so blatant, that no one could feign ignorance. And in Sakari, that instant, I realized it wasn't just adultery. It was humiliation, a calculated blow that left me vulnerable, exposed, as if I were responsible for what was happening. My entire body trembled, my throat closed, my eyes burned, and the world seemed to shrink around me. Deep down, a part of me knew I needed to fight back, but another just wanted to disappear. The feeling of helplessness was overwhelming. I felt anger, an anger that mixed pain, disbelief, and shame, and for the first time in my life, I realized that my life had been turned upside down in a few seconds. It was at that moment that a clarity began to dawn, as faint as a thread of light. I remembered the prenuptial agreement I'd signed years ago, something that at the time had seemed bureaucratic and distant, but which now became my lifeline. I remembered that I had protected what was mine, that nothing I'd built could be taken away without my voice and decision-making power. An unexpected feeling began to grow. Hope. As great as the pain was, as devastated as I was, I realized I wouldn't be destroyed. I had legal tools, I had intelligence, I had the ability to plan. It was as if a part of me said, "You will survive this, and you will come out stronger." At the same time, a wave of rational anger surged. They would have to pay for what they'd done, but I would do it strategically, not explosively. I took a deep breath, trying to control the tremors in my body, and realized that the first battle was already forming in my mind. I needed to react. I needed to protect my life and my possessions, and above all, my dignity. That day, I felt a mix of emotions I'd never felt before. Fear of facing what lay ahead, shame at having been betrayed by those close to me, intense chest pain, mental and physical exhaustion, a feeling of emotional exhaustion that made me question everything. But at the same time, a strength I hadn't known existed surged within me. I began to think of strategies, to plan each step, to remember that I wasn't alone. I had Helena, my lawyer, who would be my right-hand woman in this moment of chaos. I remembered that I needed to breathe, that I needed to organize my thoughts before acting. The emotional turmoil was great, but rationality began to gain ground, and this gave me some relief. It wasn't just pain and humiliation. There was also a path to liberation there, even if I didn't yet know exactly how to navigate it. When I finally left that meeting, alone, feeling my heart racing and my hands cold, I realized I was beginning to transform in that moment. Nothing would be the same, but something inside me had already changed. I wouldn't be a silent victim. I needed to rise again, and even though I felt the raw pain, I began to feel the seed of my own freedom and independence sprout within me. The feeling was strange, a mixture of relief and fear, but it was real. For the first time, despite the suffering, I felt I could turn things around, that I had the power to bring justice in a way no one expected. I didn't know exactly how, but I knew I would never be the same person again, and that this, somehow, would give me the strength to overcome everything. My name is Isabella. I'm 29 years old, and that day changed my life forever. After leaving the meeting, I walked aimlessly through the city, trying to process everything. The heat in my body didn't match the chill in my soul. It felt like every step I took was an effort not to collapse in the middle of the street. I thought about all the times I trusted Leonardo and Sofia. Every moment I thought we were a united family, and I wanted to scream, to punch a wall, to cry until I had no more tears. But amidst that mixture of pain and anger, something inside me began to clear. I couldn't lose my life because of them. I needed to find a way to protect myself, to keep what was mine, and still walk away with my head held high. I remembered every detail of the prenuptial agreement I'd signed years before, every clause that now became a silent weapon in my hands. It was a moment of strange lucidity, as if my mind were saying, "You can feel pain, but you don't have to destroy yourself." I took a deep breath and began mentally jotting down every step I needed to take. It was a strange feeling both angry and strategic at the same time, but it was real. When I got home, still shaking, my first call was to Helena. She was always practical and direct, and at that moment, I needed the clarity that only a professional could give me. I told her everything, unfiltered, without worrying about seeming weak or overly sensitive. She listened, confirmed my impressions, and gave me my first firm piece of advice. "Isabella, you have everything you need to emerge stronger. This isn't the time to react emotionally. It's time to act intelligently." These words were a shock of reality and hope at the same time. For the first time since discovering the betrayal, I felt like I had someone by my side who truly knew what was happening and could guide me. I was no longer alone trying to survive the chaos. I had a strategy and support. I began to realize that despite the humiliation and pain, I could turn it all into a turning point. That afternoon, I sat alone in my apartment, looking over the documents and planning each step. The feeling of being in control, however slight, was almost comforting. I thought about how Leonardo and Sofia had underestimated my intelligence, my ability to react, and protect what I had built. For the first time, I felt the tide was turning, even if it was still early. I began to think about the possible consequences for them, about the justice I could somehow deliver without being unfair, but firm. The fear still lingered, my heart still ached, but the clarity that emerged was more powerful than any negative emotion. I could feel for the first time that I was not just a victim, that I could transform pain into strength. That night, as I reflected on everything, I felt a mixture of exhaustion and determination I'd never experienced before. I was tired, mentally and physically, but also aware that that exhaustion was fuel. I began planning my finances, my investments, my career. I thought about every goal I had, every dream I could achieve now that my mind was free of the illusion of a perfect life that never existed. The anger still burned, but it was being channeled. I realized I had a chance to rebuild myself, to grow and thrive, and that gave me a kind of hope I didn't even know was possible. At the end of that day, exhausted but with unprecedented clarity, I realized that that moment of extreme pain had planted a seed of transformation within me. I would no longer be the same person who trusted blindly, who humiliated myself, who lost myself to the betrayal of others. I still felt pain, shame, and anger, but I also felt the strength and certainty that I could bounce back. For the first time, after everything, I felt that I would not only survive, but that I could thrive and find true emotional, financial, and personal freedom. And deep down, this feeling of being able to start over was both intoxicating and empowering. The next day, I woke with a mix of anxiety and determination I hadn't felt in years. Waking up in my apartment, alone, after everything that had happened, was almost surreal. The silence was heavy, but at the same time, liberating. I could think clearly, without masks, without pretense. I drank. Coffee alone, each sip giving me a little more courage. I began writing a mental list of priorities: protect my assets, plan the legal response, organize my career, and, above all, maintain my emotional sanity. The anger was still there, throbbing, but now it had been channeled into a purpose: justice and self-protection. I remembered every detail of the humiliation, every embarrassed look, every suppressed laugh I'd witnessed. And instead of paralyzing myself, I felt the need to transform that pain into action. For the first time, I felt control returning to my hands. I spent the day calling Helena, discussing strategies, analyzing documents and options. Each conversation made me feel more secure, more confident. I realized that Leonardo and Sophia had underestimated my intelligence and planning. Feeling this advantage gave me a strange sensation, as if the humiliation were being silently, almost imperceptibly reversed. But at the same time, the emotional pain remained. With each step I took to protect my assets, I felt the weight of betrayal, the emptiness of losing trust in my own family, and the need to completely restructure my life. It was exhausting, but also liberating. I began to realize that this moment of extreme pain was also a turning point I couldn't waste. While organizing my finances and documents, I realized I had neglected my own emotional security for years. I had always been overly trusting, ignoring signals, and ignoring my intuition. That humiliation brought me clarity. I needed to learn to say no, to set boundaries, to protect not only my assets but also my emotional space. It was painful to admit that my own sister could betray me, but it was also a brutal learning experience about who truly deserved my trust. I began to realize that my strength lay not only in my legal strategy or my prenuptial agreement, but in my ability to recognize and act on what was essential to my life. Late in the afternoon, after hours of mental organization and planning, I felt a strange mix of tiredness and empowerment. My body was exhausted, my mind overwhelmed, but something was growing inside me, the certainty that I could transform all that pain into personal and professional growth. I began to envision my future, a solid career, secure investments, financial freedom, and above all, a protected emotional space where no one could hurt me so intensely again. The feeling of being able to choose my destiny, even amidst the pain, was unprecedented and almost overwhelming. Before going to sleep, I took a deep breath and realized that, although I still felt sadness, anger, and disappointment, something had profoundly changed. I was beginning to rebuild myself, step by step, with clarity, strategy, and emotional strength. For the first time, I didn't feel completely defeated. I felt within my pain the possibility of victory. The pain didn't disappear, but it began to transform into fuel, into energy to rebuild my life and achieve the freedom I always deserved. And this feeling of beginning to regain control was almost as powerful as the pain I felt. In the days that followed, I began to notice small changes within myself that I never imagined possible. Every call with Helena, every organized meeting, every strategic step I took gave me more confidence and clarity. The pain was still present, but I began to separate it from the decisions I needed to make. I was no longer just the betrayed, humiliated woman. I was becoming someone capable of transforming suffering into strategy and independence. It was strange to feel anger and determination at the same time, but this combination became my fuel. I realized that I didn't need to fight to humiliate or seek revenge, because my greatest victory would simply be rebuilding my life and thriving. The process of dealing with Leonardo and Sophia was neither quick nor easy. Every meeting, every exchange of documents, every financial planning required energy and patience. I often felt like giving up, crying alone, hiding from the world. But something inside me told me that giving up was not an option. I began to realize that true strength lay not in reacting explosively, but in acting with intelligence and clarity. Every step I took to protect myself, to ensure my assets and dignity were safe, was a small victory over all the pain they had caused me. Furthermore, I began to rediscover myself professionally. I began to focus on investments, career growth, and opportunities I hadn't previously allowed myself to explore. Each achievement was small but significant, and it reminded me that, despite the betrayal and humiliation, there were still things no one could take away from me. I began to feel more independent, more secure, and little by little, I began to realize that my life didn't need to be defined by what Leonardo and Sophia did to me. I could build something new, something that was uniquely mine, with effort, intelligence, and dedication. During this time, I also learned to firmly establish boundaries. With friends, coworkers, and family, I began to realize who truly deserved my trust and who didn't. It was painful to admit that some people weren't on my side, but liberating at the same time. I realized that my pain was real, that my emotions were legitimate, but that I could manage them in a way that strengthened me. Each decision I made consciously and strategically made me feel more in control of my life and better prepared for any challenge that might arise. By the end of that year, I began to notice significant changes. I no longer felt the pain of betrayal as before. It still lingered, but it no longer paralyzed me. My career was growing, my investments were in order, and my financial life was secure. And most importantly, my self-esteem was rebuilt. I began to realize that the true victory wasn't watching Leonardo and Sophia suffer, but rather realizing that I could move forward, thrive, and find happiness without relying on anyone. For the first time, I felt I could live my life fully, with freedom, clarity, and emotional strength. Over time, I realized that life truly could change when you take control of everything that matters. My relationship with Leonardo and Sophia became irrelevant in terms of emotional control. They had to deal with their own choices and consequences, and I finally felt the relief of no longer having to waste energy on them. The feeling of freedom was incredible, as if I could finally breathe, without fear or shame. Every small victory, whether it was a well-closed contract, a profitable investment, or simply being able to sleep peacefully at night, was a reminder that I had turned things around. It was during this process that I met Daniel. Unlike any previous relationship, he entered my life unhurriedly, without demanding anything that wasn't natural. With him, I learned that love doesn't have to be based on pain, fear, or insecurity. I learned that trust and genuine respect are fundamental, and that happiness can be built slowly, with balance and partnership. I still had memories of the betrayal, but they no longer dominated my heart. On the contrary, each memory served to strengthen me, to remind me that I had survived and thrived, that I was no longer vulnerable to those past pains. Looking back today, I see that that terrible day was a turning point in my life. I still feel a pang of anger when I think about everything that happened, but I'm also proud of the woman I've become. I learned to protect my assets, to say no, to set boundaries, and to recognize those who truly deserve my love and trust. Every step I took to rebuild my life was a step toward my freedom, my independence, and my happiness. I realized that the pain was necessary for me to become stronger, more aware, and more confident. The most incredible thing is that, even though I still deal with parts of the pain today, I feel like I finally have control over my life. I don't depend on anyone to feel complete or secure. I was able to transform one of the most painful experiences of my life into learning, strategy, and growth. Each achievement I achieve now has a different flavor, because I know it was built with effort, intelligence, and resilience. It wasn't easy, it wasn't quick, but every tear and every moment of fear was worth it. If I could give advice to anyone experiencing a similar betrayal or humiliation, I would say, don't lose yourself in the pain. Don't let anyone steal your power. Use your intelligence, seek support, protect yourself, and, above all, believe that it is possible to bounce back. Today, at 29, I can say that I am stronger, freer, and happier than I ever imagined. I managed to transform pain into power, betrayal into learning, and humiliation into victory. Life went on, and I went with it, fulfilled, independent, and ready for whatever comes.